You know what today is? It's episode 52. So you know what that means?
Yes, we are 1 year old. Unfiltered has officially been on the air for 1 year, and today we get to celebrate that. It's very exciting.
We set out to create a place where women could ask questions and get answers, and really questions about anything. Nothing is off the table.
Okay, so we thought it would be fun and special to just take a moment as we open this show to reflect on some of the feedback that our listeners have shared with us because we get to see the emails that come in, and I mean, it was really hard to sift through so many emails and just try to find
Mhm.
two to share. But we're so thankful for our listeners. We're thankful that you share when something is meaningful. We've heard people say, "I feel like you're my big sisters," and that just means so much to us because we want to be a safe place of encouragement for women who sometimes we are at that time the only people that understand where they're at. So we thought we could share a little bit of that today. So our first comment that I pulled out was from a listener who says, this was on a YouTube comment, I believe. Thank you for another great episode. Thank you for all the time you invest in each one. Thank you to your listeners and their questions. Sometimes you don't even realize that was a question you needed an answer for until you heard someone else ask it. I've told others about your podcast and passed along some of your episodes. I'm so thankful and I praise the Lord for you and your ministry. I have no doubt that you are helping more ladies than you may be aware of. And I highlighted that one because I love how she said sometimes you don't know it's a question you have until
Mhm.
you hear somebody else ask it. Because I remember that being my experience when I first ordered a Betrayal and Beyond book all on my own and I didn't have help. I opened it and I thought, this lady gets where I'm at. She's asking the questions I didn't know I had. She's answering the questions I didn't know I had. She's articulating the feelings I didn't know how to formulate words for. And so I
Mhm.
liked that feedback and I've experienced it myself.
Yeah. And it is really so powerful when it's almost like other people are reading your mind and they're asking the questions that you had no idea that you needed the answer to. I love that. So another listener writes, I so appreciate this episode as menopause is the season I'm in, sharing this with my husband to help him better understand how this season of life affects the body. Much respect to the men who sent these questions. So much we can learn about each other if we're willing to, and even if the conversation is uncomfortable. So I love that too, because again, we wrote this or we started Unfiltered so that women would have a safe space, but we also have received several questions from men too. And
Mhm.
it's really encouraging.
Yeah, I saw one comment that was like, I'm a man, and this is so helpful to us men to be listening. So, I mean, we originally started this because we would travel around and do the women's conferences, and we always kept a special hour for just the women to come and ask us
Mhm.
anything. And though we have never had an hour with women where it wasn't completely full of questions and they had more. And so this
Mhm.
is our way of keeping that Q&A safe place to ask questions and get answers and hear what other people are asking and what other people are struggling with or finding victory through. We're just keeping that conversation going. So,
So, we just really wanted to thank our listeners. Thank you for this great first year. Thank you for sending your questions. Thank you for trusting us with your stories and allowing us to be a voice to your questions. We really couldn't do this without you.
no, we couldn't. So, thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening and making Unfiltered exactly what it is today and what we wanted it to be. So, happy birthday to us, and let's jump into our 52nd episode. You're listening to Unfiltered, real talk about sex and love with Ashley.
And Heather. And on today's episode, we're going to be answering questions surrounding forgiveness, empathy, and triggers, which a lot of times we get many questions on all of these topics. And so hopefully this will provide some answers for our audience today. So I'm just going to jump in. Our first question says, I'd love to hear you discuss forgiveness. We're often warned against forgiving too soon or improperly, yet rarely told how to forgive the right way. When is the right time? What does forgiveness look like without reconciliation or trust, can forgiveness lead to bitterness in a betrayed wife? Oh, can unforgiveness lead to bitterness in a betrayed wife? This is a very common question that we get from betrayed partners, especially. And we also hear this question from the spouse who struggles as well, because a lot of times when they start doing their healing work and they are doing really well and they've gained sobriety, they still wonder why it is that their spouse hasn't forgiven them. And forgiveness is, in my personal opinion, and from what I understand from scripture, is that forgiveness is something that has phases, if you want to call them, has different steps. Because if you look at forgiveness within the context of reconciliation or building trust, that type of forgiveness requires two people who are on the same road to recovery, who have the same goal in mind, working together. And so if that is part of what a betrayed partner is dealing with, forgiveness in that context is not necessarily just going to be something that one side is going to do. Because when it comes to forgiveness, just in general, I believe scripture when it says that unforgiveness can interfere with our relationship with God. And so I know for me personally that when I'm in a situation that requires me forgiving another person, I have to go through it in these stages. Like I have to work it out between me and God first, and make sure that I'm understanding not only what I'm forgiving, but what it is that God requires of me in forgiving this other person. Because I know there are people in my life or in my past that I totally have forgiven them, but yet I will never have a relationship with them because they're not a safe person. And so the idea of reconciliation or building trust within that relationship, that's never going to happen. But in order for me to be healthy and have a healthy heart and a healthy attitude toward what God requires in my life, I know that between me and God, I need to forgive that person just so that I can move forward in my healing.
Yeah.
But then I also believe that unforgiveness can lead to not only bitterness, but other really harmful behaviors or attitudes and feelings for a betrayed partner. And specifically within the context of how it affects your brain. Because we talk so much about how stress increases cortisol and it causes our brain to be stuck in the limbic system. Well, bitterness, holding on to bitterness, does the same thing. And so it causes us this undue stress and this area of our brain that ends up being stuck because we're not willing to move through that process of forgiveness. Does that make sense? So, and again, there's so much more to this question, and I'm sure you'll add some of those elements, Ash, but it just is, forgiveness is not like a, here's how it looks in every single situation, because I don't even think there is such a thing.
Yeah. And I think too, like, I know this is really a struggle for me because you hear scripture saying, you need to forgive others the way you've been forgiven. And it can be so confusing. But when you look up just the straight definitions of forgiveness, there's like canceling a debt, and then there's stop feeling an offense toward. And so I think that's where we want betrayed spouses to think of is, we're not telling you, we're not advising that you say what you did is okay. What they did is not okay, but it does not help us at all to continue to feel angry toward somebody. And so that's what we're working toward, is kind of letting it go, but not like, oh, just forget about it and let it go, but releasing it to God so that we don't have to carry that burden, that stress. And I've been through enough ups and downs and relapses and things with John to know that in the early stages, rightfully so, where I was in early stages, I still was processing through a lot and understanding that process that you just explained and working through it. My body would just feel so crippled and paralyzed. And you were with me in all of that. You know how it was, like not being able to get out of bed, just so depressed. Like it would just consume me. And then later on, when I had worked through the process of forgiveness a little more and really realized that I do not have to be attached to his behaviors, and his actions are between him and God. And they hurt
Mm-hmm.
me. They change my life when he does something that impacts our family or our sexual life or whatever. But to just really get to that point where I can understand each little piece that I'm processing and releasing to God and trying to eliminate that bitterness and anger and resentment I have toward him has been so freeing, because then as you navigate the ups and downs of addiction, there's this part that, it's completely out of your control what somebody else does. And that's a miserable way to live if you're attached to, if they're doing well, you're doing well. And so that's what
Mm-hmm.
we want betrayed spouses get to, is if they're not doing well, that does not have to take you down with them. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it is a process. And for me, I will not have the fuzzy feelings of like, I have no anger and no bitterness, but I'll put myself in the mindset of saying, I'm working toward releasing this. I'm working toward forgiving you. I'm working toward not being resentful. But right now, I am angry. And as you
Mm-hmm.
continue to do the things you're supposed to do, then we're either going to lean toward reconciliation, or I'm going to lean toward, this is on you. You need to deal with it with God, but I'm not going to be part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is a process. Hopefully that helps. All those many
Yeah.
examples.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the things too that we tell betrayed partners all the time that I don't think anyone is ever expected to forgive something that they don't know what they're forgiving. And
Right.
so I also feel that this goes hand in hand with having full disclosure,
Yeah.
and especially when it comes to reconciliation, if you're going to stay in the relationship, then you need to know exactly what it is that you're forgiving. And at the same time, if you're a betrayed partner and you're not going to be in that relationship and you're not going to get all the answers that you want in order to forgive, you may come to a time where you have to forgive for you and for your relationship with God, even though you're not going to know
Right.
everything that you want to,
Yeah.
all the details. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of complex.
It is. And I would just say, we promise you it can be better when you can get to that place. And so just be gracious
Mm-hmm.
with yourself, be patient with yourself, and continue to work toward releasing that so you don't have to carry all of that stress.
Yeah. Okay, so our second question says, can you discuss practical tools for building empathy in a relationship? It feels essential for healing, especially after betrayal, but it's often hard to know where to start. What are some specific actions and strategies that can help partners develop deeper empathy and understanding for each other's feelings and experiences? This is a really great question because empathy is one of those things that is basically a learned behavior. And a lot of people, especially people who struggle with addictive behaviors, they weren't raised in an environment where empathy was modeled for them. And so this is something that that once a person gets to a place in their healing that they want to learn how to develop empathy, there are some really great tools. And one of them that I can think of is when you talk to your spouse about their highs and lows for the day. And really, it's where each of you take turns or go first and say, this was my high for the day, and then this was my low for the day. And then the other partner who's just listening, their response is key. Because if you're building empathy, your goal in having this form of communication is not to fix any problems that your spouse had, right?
Mhm.
It's just to listen. And sometimes it even takes writing out some responses or practicing those responses to say, wow, that sounds like it was a really hard thing today. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And then that's it. That's all that you say. Because it is one of the things that when it comes to building empathy, it's different than just being able to listen to what somebody says and being able to say, yeah, I can understand that would be really hard. Empathy comes from a point of view that not only can you understand what they're saying, but that you can feel the way that they feel, that you can actually take on the feelings of another person to the point where you feel it the same or similar to the person that you're talking to. And so that's just one that I could think of is being able to, in a safe relationship, start talking about your highs and lows. And this might be, if you're a person who struggles with empathy, with developing empathy, this isn't something that you want to just start doing with the dozens of people that you know. It's important that you just start small and with one person, and kind of a safe person that you can even practice your responses, and even being able to ask that person, okay, so the way I responded, was that okay? Is there something different that I should have said or done? And just kind of using that environment to reinforce what you're trying to learn.
Mm. Yeah, I like how you said, asking the question, is that okay? Is there something different I could have done? Because that's kind of what I was going to say too. As a betrayed partner who also had my own addictions, um, I tried to put myself back in that mindset of like, I know what it feels like to wake up one day and say, how did I get here? I know better. Why am I struggling with this? I know that firsthand. That's how I felt with my eating disorder. Um, I'm like, I work in a gastroenterology office and I struggle with an eating disorder. And I don't even remember honestly how I got there. I just remember one day going, how did I get here? And so, and the struggle, and so the knowledge you have doesn't always stop you from doing those things that are harmful. Um, and then with sexual acting out, I have some of that history too. And so I was able to put myself in the mindset of, I know that when I do X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean I don't love God. It doesn't mean I don't love my spouse because I've been there before. And so that helped me as a betrayed spouse have some empathy toward John. And then on the reverse side, if you are the one who struggles, I think it's really good if you're able to go to the betrayed spouse and say, can you help me put myself in your shoes? Because when John gives me the space to say, imagine it this way, and I've done this with John before, I've said, imagine that you are in a relationship with somebody, even a best friend, a coworker, or, another wife, and they are constantly lying to you. Every time you turn the corner, you discover a new lie. Would you be able to stay in a relationship? Would you feel like that person cared about you, honored you? Would you trust them as a best friend, as a boss, as a wife? And he said no. And I said, that has been my life. I think at that point it was like 11 years in our marriage. And he said that really helped switch, the narrative for him to at least be able to understand what it is that we feel on the side of the betrayed spouse. So those are kind of my two examples, whether you're the betrayed spouse, but also it's a fine line, like as a betrayed spouse, to put yourself in the addict's shoes, to not
Right.
minimize it. And so there's times where I'm like, okay, I can have grace and empathy, and still I need my boundaries. I need my safety. I need to be able to know that they're working and growing and moving toward this, because if I don't see that, then it's like, yeah, I understand what it feels like to be an addict. And also I'm not gonna be in this relationship. So it is a balance.
Definitely.
Our next question is, after 30 years of marriage and my husband's struggle with sexual addiction, he's found freedom. But a recent non-sensual massage triggered me. Non-sensual massage triggered me, reminding me of past betrayals. Am I overreacting? Do I need more healing? Should I ask him to seek another man's perspective or just let it go? And so, at first I read this as message, like a non-sensual message, but massage, I think especially in this space, it's okay to have some boundaries. And so what are some, or to have to change things right now? So I know for me early in my marriage, and even now, like if John wanted to go get a massage, because he has even a history with massage parlors, um, and bathhouses and things, I would not like that. I would not like him just going and randomly picking a masseuse. I would want to know who you're going to see. I would probably recommend something like, I think I'd feel okay if you got a massage at like a physical therapy office or a chiropractic office. And I know he gets weird about like men massaging him, but we've gone and got couples massages like in the mall, and it usually is like guys together. And so I have some some boundaries around massages for John. And I don't know if I'll ever fully let those go. And I think that's okay. That's part of our
Mm-hmm.
story. That's part of his um, slippery slope. And so just like me, there's things I choose not to do anymore because it's not good for my marriage and it was a slippery slope for me. Um, and so I don't think it's bad that you're triggered. I think if you feel like they should speak to a man, about this, but I would actually just start by talking with him
Mm-hmm.
and saying, I think this situation would help me if you got these kinds of massages or went to these kinds of places or we went and got a couples massage in the same room, whatever it is you need, and start there. If he's really defensive and shifts the blame or says, you're just so overreactive and I feel like I live in a prison, and these are things I heard before, then I would say, you should talk with your group leader. But no matter what he comes back to say, if that's something you need in order to feel safe in your marriage, then that's okay to ask for
Mm-hmm.
those things.
Yeah. And because you're not overreacting. And the question that says, do I need more healing? Maybe. You know what I mean? If it's something that is like still a super strong trigger for you, then you may need some other healing or need to just go a little deeper in that. But if it was something that, like you were saying, if this is always going to be a trigger and there has to be really strong, healthy boundaries around massage parlors, then great. You know,
Yeah.
that all of those things are okay because for the
Mhm.
partner, you need what's going to be safe for you, what's going to keep you moving toward healing and not spiraling in a trigger every time this comes up.
Yeah. And it may be as simple as like if you've done deep work and this is something that's triggered you, it may be you reach out to somebody in your group or
Mm-hmm.
and just process like I'm feeling triggered and work through it. Because sometimes we do
Mm-hmm.
get triggers. Even I get triggers sometimes, depending on what it is. When I see a
Mm-hmm.
movie that has a prostitute scene, I get triggered and I have to work through
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I'm able to work through it a lot faster and it doesn't take over my body in the same way as it used to. But it's still
Mm-hmm.
something that would trigger me and I will just like kind of work through it mentally. So yeah, that's a really good question. But start with asking, and then if you need to send a follow-up question to us, then feel free to do that. Okay, well, these were some really good questions and hard questions. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
remember being in all of these spaces, and it's really tough. So I just am grateful that these listeners feel safe to send us their questions. So thank you for joining our conversation today. And, as we say, if you can think about it, we should be talking about it. So please send us more questions. Send them to unfiltered@puredesire.org. And if you found this episode helpful, make sure to like it or share it with a friend.